Hi, welcome to podcast number 5. It's a very, very special edition today here at Samarpan. And we're going to do the podcast a little bit differently. We're going to have 2 parts to this today. So firstly, I'd just like to welcome Roland Williams here from the Gorski-CENAPS Foundation, who is here visiting. Roland, welcome to Samarpan. Maybe you could tell our viewers why you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to tell the viewers why I'm here. I'm here in my capacity as the CEO and Director of Training for the CENAPS organization to present
And you always get it wrong, but it's Samarpan.
Samarpan. I have a struggle with that word for some reason, but I'm here to present Samarpan with the CENAPS, the Gorski-CENAPS Center of Excellence Award. And it is an award that's designated and allocated to programs who have taken the Gorski Advanced Certified Relapse Prevention Specialist training, become certified, demonstrated competence in the model, and have implemented the CENAPS model of relapse prevention therapy into their treatment protocol. And Samarpan has done a wonderful job of doing that, and I'm here this week to present the award that you see right there.
Which I think is this award there, and obviously we have this lovely certificate as well that the centre has been awarded by the CENAPS organisation.
It's well deserved, and Samarpan is the first program in all of Asia to have this designation, so it's pretty special. Good job.
Thank you, Roland. I mean, just a little bit more, just very briefly on the CENAPS Centre of Excellence, the CENAPS model, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about it a little bit later, but could you just maybe very briefly explain the difference this training, this award sort of makes towards centres and their practice?
Absolutely. Many centers around the world offer, promote, suggest, say, advertise that they do relapse prevention. And as we know in substance use disorder treatment, the recidivism rate is very high. We know also in these days that there's a higher fatality rate, mortality rate for people who relapse. So there's an urgency around relapse. Over 40 years ago, our founder for the CENAPS organizations, Terence Gorski, was a pioneer in identifying clinical techniques that could minimize the frequency and the intensity of a chemical relapse, a return to active use. And he developed some techniques that have been used and utilized all over the world. And so when programs say that they do relapse prevention, most of them are doing fragments of his model anyway. They're doing fragments of the CENAPS model. What this team at Samarpan has done is they've learned the full model. They've learned it from the source, very intensive training, and the few programs that have this Center of Excellence designation, what that implies is that they're not just doing a generic version of relapse prevention, but they're capable of doing some in-depth clinical work that allows them to get to the core, the root cause of relapse, and develop a relapse prevention plan and a revised recovery plan that's evidence-based and is proven to have much, much better outcomes. So it's very comprehensive. It's not a lot of theory, it's a lot of technique. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been I've thoroughly enjoyed the training myself, and obviously, as you know, I've worked in the field for quite a long time. So, you know, and going back through doing the certification, doing the exercises, I find it really useful as well. And the training is really, really very intensive, isn't it? I mean, you were here last year for well, it was 6 days. I think we did 5 full days, and then we did a 6th day. That was a little bit more specific with the Centre of Excellence stuff, but you know, it's. I mean, maybe just explain that little part about the training, what people undertake.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to do that. So the CENAPS trainings are, CENAPS is an organization where we provide resources, services, consulting, training, books for people in the behavioral health industry, primarily substance use disorders and coexisting mental health conditions. And probably the number one thing that we're most known for, it goes back and forth between our publications. We have about 150 publications on multiple different topics. You can see there's one of them right there. There's one of my books. It's called Recovery as a Verb.
Which is this wonderful book, actually, Roland. It's a fantastic book.
Thank you. It's a workbook. Yeah. And then I also have a workbook that I published with Terrence Gorski himself, Relapse Prevention for African Americans. But we have 100 and probably 40 books on all kind of topics, from trauma to denial management, to craving management, to formerly incarcerated clients, for adolescents, older adults. There's a ton of resources. So that's the one thing we're known for. The other thing that we're really known for is the training that we do. This particular training that Martin is talking about, the training that meets the academic requirements to get certified as an advanced relapse prevention specialist, is the most intensive training that we do. It's 5 days long, full days, and it's very experiential, very interactive. It's not one of those trainings that you would come and listen to a presenter talk all day. What the motto is that we introduce a technique, we demonstrate it, and then the participants practice it. So they're in groups, they do one-on-ones, they work as, I'm the counselor 1 minute, I'm the client the next minute, I'm the group facilitator. So group member, they get to education and support on how to facilitate groups, how to do public speaking, how to do one-on-one sessions, how to do manualized treatment. They actually work through the workbook during the course of treatment. And people wind up, it's also designed to help the participants get in touch with some of their own issues. So people actually, all the people that do this training leaves with some sort of insight about themselves. Not only do they leave with hands-on techniques that they can start using next week back at their office, but they also leave with some insight about themselves that they didn't have when they got there. The training lends itself to that by the structure. And you guys were amazing students. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. I think it was a fantastic training, and for us as a team over the last year of implementing that model into the program, it's been really cool. Myself and Obi have been really fully committed to getting the staff team to buy into it, which they have. I mean, every single member of our residential team has completed that work. Yeah. One of our new staff is coming in, is going to undertake it as well. So the model is implemented in the program. Obviously, the model of this relapse prevention, and I don't want to talk too much on clinical because Obi's going to have a chat about you with the clinical, but it got me thinking a little bit because, having been in India for a little while, there does seem to be a little bit of a not that great an understanding about what relapse prevention is. I sort of ask the questions often, and people say, well, relapse prevention is going to a meeting and doing the 12 steps, or that all we need to do is work on triggers. Maybe, I mean, what is your take on that? I mean, it's quite rudimentary, in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think when I talk to Obi, I'll talk a little bit about one of the clients that Obi has been working with, who's been working on this model. So remind me to just talk about that. But as you alluded to, it's kind of like I was saying earlier, that a lot of programs say they're doing relapse prevention. They have some component where they're doing relapse prevention education, they're doing fundamental concepts about relapse prevention. Stay out of don't go to bars to watch the game. Stay out of slippery places. Don't go to the dope dealer's house. Don't drink non-alcoholic beer. Those kind of things. Those are pretty common, generic relapse triggers, relapse warning signs. What we do with the Synapse model is much more comprehensive. We start with first determining, we operate on a premise that you can't relapse if you're not in recovery. So first of all, we start with, what does it look like when you're in recovery? Let's go back to you being in stable recovery. We determined there's two things we want to distinguish between. One is relapse prevention education that every client should get. Any client going to any treatment program, the treatment program is irresponsible and not doing their job if they don't give people basic understanding about what is relapse prevention. You know, relapse starts way before you pick up the drink or the drug. Relapse is a process, not an event. Abstinence is not the same as recovery. Some of those fundamental things. Learn to identify some of your own relapse triggers. Those are basic things everybody should know. Then you have the chronic relapser, the person who's had difficulty staying clean and sober. This is a person who can get clean and sober, they can't stay clean and sober. So that's where we come in with this really intensive model, which is kind of a specialty. And what we do is we first determine what did it look like when that person was in recovery. And then once we identify what were the components of your particular program, because my being in recovery might look different from Martin's being in recovery, it might look different from my brother Obi being in recovery, it might look different from my sister, my neighbor. So people have different versions of what it means to be recovery. We be in recovery. We find out what was your recovery, and then how did you go from stable recovery to using again? What were the steps that you went from stable recovery to using again? And then we pick apart, we have a lot of different techniques that we use to identify personalized, individualized warning signs for that particular person. So for example, you know, for some people, if you smoke a cigar, that's a treat. For some people, if they smoke a cigar, that's a relapse warning sign. For some people, if they go to the racetrack, to the casino, that's a leisure activity. For some people, going to the casino is a relapse trigger. For some people, helping someone can be a relapse trigger. For some people, not helping someone could be a relapse trigger. Some people need to cry, some people need to quit crying. It's all individualized. We go through about 7 different methods to help people identify their own individualized warning signs. We identify potential high-risk situations that they may go through. We do what we call an early intervention plan. So even in the beginning of treatment, we anticipate that even though you're motivated right now, there may come a time where you're not so motivated, where you start backsliding, you start regressing. We want to know why you're in a good place, what's that going to look like? And give me some tips as the counselor, as the clinician, as the provider on how I can intervene. What should I do? What form of feedback works best for you? Who should I call? Who are the people in your life that are part of your support system? So now we've gathered that. Then we start to accumulate this list of personalized, individualized relapse warning signs for that person. And we don't stop there. Then we analyze that list. We actually make cards, and we're able to sequence the process of how they go from stable recovery to picking up a drink or drug. We analyze each warning sign, and it's tied into a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. We analyze the warning sign, each one by one. We have the client name this warning sign. We have a description of what it looks like when that warning sign is activated, and then we look at the connecting high-risk thoughts, feelings, urges, and actions and reactions connected to that warning sign. And then, after all of that, we develop management strategies for those warning signs, and we develop a revised recovery plan, because a lot of times people will say, I'm in recovery, this is what my recovery program looks like, but in many cases, what you discover in this process, that your recovery program was not matching your issues. Like you have some issues that got neglected. Like you're doing great, you're going to your meetings, you're going to your therapy, you're going to the gym, but you're not dealing with your trauma, you're not dealing with your shame, you're not dealing with your stealing, you're not dealing with your gambling. So if your recovery program doesn't address your issues, then it's just busy work. So this process takes you through all of that. And we learn that, and we go through that in the training. In the training, every person who participates in the training, if they fully participate, leaves having done all of that stuff that I just mentioned in 5 days.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, one of the words that you've talked about there a lot is around about recovery, and maybe you could share a little bit about your own personal experience, if you don't mind me asking. I think you're normally quite open about that you're in recovery. Maybe you could explain a little bit about your story, and maybe also around about the whole thing about what we talk about, because we've talked before at the times, and you said, I've been clean and sober for a long time, but there have been times when I've started to
Absolutely.
work a process.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I'm actually proud to be in recovery. I'm proud of the fact that I'm in recovery. I'm a person with long-term recovery, as they say. I stopped doing drinking and using. I got clean and sober on June 10th, 1986. June 10th, 1986 is more important to me than my birthday. It's more important to my family than my birthday. Everybody knows that if it wasn't for that date, I wouldn't have birthdays. If it wasn't for that date, I wouldn't have this career. And I got clean when I was 29 years old, and I was a mess as a teenager. I got into. I grew up in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. There was a lot of drugs and alcohol in my community and my family. I got caught up in it very quickly. It got out of hand very quickly. I think I had about 5 good years, maybe 7 good years where it was fun, and then it stopped being fun. In the last 5 years of my using, I wanted to stop, and I didn't know how. I was miserable. I hated it, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know anybody that had stopped, and I wound up coming to a place in my life where I had a child, a 4-year-old son, and I'm adopted, so he was my first blood. He was my motivation for getting clean. I had what they call in recovery a moment of clarity, and I looked at him in the back seat of a car one morning, and it occurred to me that if I didn't stop using, he didn't have a chance. And that was the piece for me. That was the missing piece. I never knew my father, and so I wanted to be a good father. I didn't want to put him through what I had gone through, and I stopped for him. And many people say that you can't stop for other people, you have to stop for yourself. I believe whatever reason you stop is a good reason. There's no wrong reason to do the right thing. Secondarily, I was going to go to prison if I didn't stop. So I literally went to a rehab in handcuffs from jail. I was 29 years old. I had this son that I wanted to give a better life to. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life on drugs or in prison, and I went to a rehab. And my life changed. My life completely changed. I went one time to rehab. I had the perfect team for me. I had a charismatic lead counselor, director, who looked like me, looked enough like me, and was smart as a whip. And the people cared about me, the team cared. And that guy who was the director, who was so smart, he was doing something with his intellect in a good way. I was using my intellect in a bad way, in my addiction. And I wanted to be like him. I thought I want to be like, his name was Richard, and I thought I want to be like Richard. And so at 29 years old, I had never had a job. I didn't work when I was in my addiction, and I didn't know what to do for work. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a counselor like Richard. And in 1986 in California, you didn't need any credentials to be a counselor. All you had to do was be able to talk the talk. And the talk was 12-step talk. Because in 1986, the 12-step program was the fundamental foundation of 95% of the treatment programs in the United States, and probably in the world. Well, not necessarily, because the different parts of the world had a whole different approach. And I have not drank and used since June 10th, 1986. I've been continuously abstinent from drugs and alcohol. But as Martin is talking about, I have been, and this is consistent with what we talk about in relapse. Relapse is a process, in the synapse model, relapse is a process, not an event. You're in relapse mode way before you pick up the drink or the drug. So I've been in relapse mode, full-blown relapse mode, probably 6 or 7 times in the last 37 and a half years. I have relapsed on food, I have relapsed on gambling, I have relapsed on spending, I have relapsed on working, I have relapsed on anger, I have relapsed on sex. Anything that I like, I can do in excess, and I have. And what I've learned over the years is when people stop getting high, they don't stop wanting to fix. They're still, and the addictive part of them tends to, it's like whack-a-mole, like that game at the park. It's like whack-a-mole.
Another one pops up. I put that one down, and another one comes back up. People would say, "Man, you lost weight." I've lost weight. I've lost the same 20 kilos 10 times in the last 30. Right, Martin? You've seen it. Well, we go back quite a long time. So yeah, sure. So so
I started working, I'll say this real quickly, I started working in the field. I got my first job as a counselor on December 31st, 1986. And I had no experience, no credentials. All I was doing was mimicking what I saw the counselor Richard do in treatment. I was copying Richard, but I'm not Richard. And his style was his style, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I had a client one day confront me in group to point out to me that I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt horrible. I felt like an imposter, like I could hurt somebody, pretending like I'm some kind of counselor. They gave me a business card when I first got a job. It said, Roland Williams, chemical dependency therapist. I was like, whoa, I'm giving everybody my business card. There's a card, there's a card. And I felt like an imposter though, and this client exposed me in group. And that was one of the closest times that I ever had that I wanted to use since I've been clean. And instead of using, I went to part of my support system, a sponsor that has now passed away, and he encouraged me to try something different. He gave me some good 12-step advice, and I made a decision that I wasn't going to use, but if I was going to do this work as a counselor, then I'm going to do it well. And I started going to school, and I paid my whole way through school. And right now I have so many initials after my name, I have to put them under my name. And I have embarked on this career that has taken me to places like India and all over the world. Martin and I have been to Australia together, we've been to Thailand together, we've been to the UK together, we've been all over the US together, and we're here in India together. This career has been, and I've been to tons of other places with other people, and it's just amazing to be able to see. My history lets me know that it works. Recovery works. I don't care how far you got, there's hope, and that people do get better and their lives do change.
Just on that, and talking about 12 steps, and I think we were having a conversation yesterday, and someone said, well, there's only one way of doing recovery, and there is only one way, and that is AA. Nothing else works. And what's your take on that? I'm not in 12-step recovery, as you know. The programs that I've worked in and programs that I've led have not been 12-step programs, and I have to be honest, at times I've been castigated for not being in 12-step recovery. You're sort of seen as a bit of an outlier, that you're seen as a little bit sort of a maverick or wherever it might be. I took a lot of flack over the years, particularly from people in 12-step recovery, and particularly when I was in Thailand at times, it was quite vitriolic because, I wasn't one of them. So, what's your take on sort of, 12 steps in treatment and other approaches?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm a 12-step person. I got clean and sober in the 12-step program, and I continue to utilize 12-step programs. I love it. I personally like the 12-step. As a recovering person, the 12 steps work for me. I tell people all the time, if they work for you, you're lucky, because they're huge. There are meetings all over. I've been to meetings in Kathmandu. I've been to meetings in 400-year-old churches in Spain. I've been to meetings in Moscow. There's AA and NA meetings all over the world. So you automatically have a support system of other people who want to get clean and sober. There's structure there. They have the step system, which is very comparable to the 10 Commandments or the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths. There's the Golden Rule. It's just a set of practices that if you were to live your life like this, you'd probably have a better life. And 12 steps have been adapted into all kinds of things besides drugs and alcohol. And have been around since 1935, unchanged. And so something about them works, but they don't work for everybody. And it's been, in the early 1940s, the addiction treatment, which the field itself was very young, they embraced the 12-step model because it was the only thing that was somewhat structured with these steps. So they embraced that model, and in the U.S. primarily, which from the U.S. often grows into other countries. The assumption is the U.S. is kind of a pioneer and they know what they're doing. And so other programs start using 85-95% of all the programs in the U.S. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, had a 12-step foundation. And people feel as strongly when they're in the 12-step program as a person in any religion who feels that if you don't, this is the only way. Like you would hear people in some religions say that you can't get to heaven unless you come this way. And as a matter of fact, if you don't come this way, not only will you not get to heaven, but you're going to go to hell, and there's going to be fire and brimstone and gnashing of teeth. You know, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's scare tactics. If you don't follow this pace, you're in trouble. And the 12-step program has a little bit of that, maybe a lot of that. There's some dogmatic, self-righteous belief system. And I get it, because I remember the first time I read an article by an author. His name was Stanton Peele. And he talked about the diseasing of America, because the 12-step operates under a disease model of addiction. And he thought that it was all just shambles. It was all a hustle, that it doesn't work, and it's not a disease, and the 12 steps are ineffective. And I thought, how dare he talk bad about this program that saved my life and so many other people's lives. It's like I said to Martin and Obi yesterday, it's like somebody calling your baby ugly. Man, that's an ugly baby you got. You're like really offended. And I started listening to some of the stuff he said, and I started reflecting, because now I'm a counselor. At this point, I'm working as a counselor. And I was getting confused in my work about when I'm talking to clients, am I talking as a counselor or am I talking as a sponsor? Am I talking as an NA member?
Yes.
And what I'm saying to him, my feedback was typically NA jargon. I would say stuff like, turn it over, go to a meeting, call your sponsor. First things first, think it through. Your best thinking got you here. Keep it simple, stupid. We have all these little slogans and these little catchphrases, and I could easily rely on that. I also could easily rely on developing a relationship with the client by telling the client that I too was in recovery. So if I tell you that I'm one too, I'm an addict also, then automatically the assumption is that we have a connection. And what I learned when that client pointed out that I didn't know what I was doing, that's not enough. See, I didn't have any real clinical techniques. I didn't know about cognitive behavioral therapy or rational emotive therapy or motivational interviewing or relapse prevention therapy or Rogerian client-centered therapy or any of those things. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was turn it over. Go to a meeting, call your sponsor. And that's what I relied on. And I realized that wasn't enough. And I learned over the years, there's a lot of myths and bad information that goes around, and sometimes we as 12-step people promote that. We reinforce that. Things like you have to be one to help one. You have to be an addict to help an addict. You'll hear my friend Obi talk in a minute. Obi is one of the sharpest clinicians I know. He's not in recovery. Martin's not in recovery. Both of them are sharp, passionate, committed, work their butts off to help people for years. Neither one of them in recovery. I know a whole bunch of people that are not in recovery that work in this field that are extremely effective. So you don't have to be one to help one. And the other myth is that if you're in recovery, you're going to be a good counselor. If you're in recovery, you're probably going to be a good counselor. And there's a whole lot of people in recovery that need to get out of the business. They're leaking, as we say in Chicago. They're leaking their own personal issues all over the place. And so there's no one way is better. There are people in recovery that are really good, amazing counselors. There are people that are not in recovery. But when we say things to clients that, well, he's not one of us. Or if a client said, I just had a person in one of my groups that I do who's been clean for 18 years. For 18 years, say that, she can't help me because she's not in recovery. And I had to correct her. That's not true. She doesn't have to be in recovery to help you. It's not the messenger, it's the message. Yeah, and so what I've learned over the years is that it's not about whether you're in recovery or not. It's whether the client feels that you know what you're talking about, or the person that you're working with feels that you know what you're talking about and you care about them. Those are the things that are important. And what I learned over the years, once I started to recognize that I needed more than the 12 Steps program to work with other people, it occurred to me that the 12 Steps aren't the only way. Like a lot of people do not like the 12 steps. They don't believe in God. There is a very religious-like aspect to it. A lot of references to God in the 12-step meeting. And there are people who don't believe in God. So do they get a chance to recover? Can they recover if they don't have a higher power or don't have a God? Some people are not necessarily big group people. And so I had to start to explore what are some alternatives, because historically the response that people said they didn't like AA was keep going until you start liking it. You're in denial, your best thinking got you here, keep it simple, stupid, that kind of stuff. So we've learned over the years that we have tons of alternatives. We have Refuge Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Smart Recovery, Life Ring, Celebrate Recovery, the Red Road to Recovery, White Bison, Women for Sobriety. There are tons of self-help support groups, and we as people working in this field need to know that and offer those options to people.
I mean, it's really interesting because you mentioned Stanton Peele, and you know, for some people he's seen as almost the antichrist, I think, and you know, I read a lot of what Stanton has written over the years, and actually, you know, there's some really interesting stuff that Stanton has come up with that sort of at least sort of opens it up to that there's more than just one way, and I think that's, you know, to me, you know, we need people like Stanton, because without Stanton, we would be, people like Stanton, we'd be stuck sort of doing the same thing. And you know, I sort of go back to this where, you know, for my initial, you know, I've heard therapists turn around and say, well, I've never worked with a client that doesn't want to do the 12 steps. I find that really hard to believe. I've heard, there's no point doing any of this mental health work or any of that sort of therapy side. All we need to do is put them through step work, and that's how we should be doing our counselling, our treatment. It should be just doing step work. I mean, what's your opinion on step work in treatment programs?
Well, times have changed in the U.S. I can speak for the U.S. and parts of the Europe for sure. Times have changed. You know, that's a very outdated perspective. Any therapist who that's their position, in that there are still people. I mean, we heard a doctor last night, a psychiatrist with a lot of experience, possibly. I wasn't 100% clear that was what he's saying, but I thought I heard him say that if you're not doing AA, you're not in recovery. If you're not, AA is the only way. I thought I heard him say that. And I actually heard a doctor say, and he called me up. I was checking on him to see how it was going. He said, this program is very nice, very beautiful, but it's a lot of fluff, and it doesn't have enough substance for me. And so he was very critical anyway. and so I came over to look at the program. The program was absolutely beautiful, but the schedule was kind of light. It's kind of what we alluded to earlier. The schedule is a little light. The staff interaction was a little, it needed more work.
Yeah.
And Martin was one of the directors of the program at that time. And I sat down with Martin, just kind of like what we were talking about with Stanton Peele. I sat down and I said, hey, my client is complaining about this, and that. And after looking at it, I think you could tighten something up. And you said, what do you think we could do? And that's how a conversation started. You were open to saying, what do you think we need to do? And we started a collaboration that has lasted for the last 15 years on and on. We become friends and become colleagues. We implemented together a lot of changes in that program. The program got a lot tighter, and we've stayed friends and colleagues ever since then. And so what I've seen here, and then you didn't stop with that. I mean, you, as shifting from mental health to and medical care to almost primarily substance abuse, substance use disorders, and mental health, you start doing your own homework and saying, what can I add to this? So thanks for that. And then you didn't just stop with that. You've been looking and growing and evolving as a program manager, program director, curriculum developer, clinician, intake person, because you do it all. You know, you do everything. And you've gotten very skilled at that. And it's been a pleasure watching that, and I'm very impressed with who you are. You're like the big boss over here. You and Obi have created this amazing program that can stand up to compare with any program in the U.S. Either be as good as or better than most any program in the U.S., and at a fraction of the cost. I mean, I won't even mention your prices, but it's a fraction of the cost. For a beautiful, if you guys could just see this facility, it's amazing. It's breathtakingly beautiful. And the content of the program, and like with Dara, which was beautiful in Thailand, it was beautiful, but in the beginning, the content didn't match the beauty, and people don't go to treatment to be in a beautiful place.
Exactly.
They go to treatment to save their lives. And so what you have here is a very ideal combination of a beautiful, safe facility and a very, very strong and robust clinical program.
Thank you. I think I'm pretty out of questions for now, and I think, thank you, Roland. We're going to do a part 2 with Obi. So, thank you very much. We're really proud also to that's really cool, and
that is very cool.
It's great, and I'm just going to make one more plug, obviously, because this is a really, really, really cool workbook.
Thank you.
All right, this recovery is a verb, and anyone that's working in the field, certainly well worth purchasing, worth reading. It's available, I think, on Amazon as well.
It is, yes.
And we do have some copies here at Samarpan. So for those that are in India that may want to have a look at that, and just also, just keep an eye on our updates and our social media, and and Roland showing a
Look at this handsome devil. I didn't see this until today. So he's at the front page on Insight Care Healthcare Solutions Hub. So check it out. Their website is insightcare.in. A wonderful article about Martin and his history and Samarpan and the work that they're doing over here.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you very much, Roland.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand it over to my fellow expert and colleague is Obi. So thank you very much. Thank you, Roland.
Good job.